It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to outbrew the magic world. As always, the deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out the links down in the description. I'd really appreciate it. But today is Halloween, and so I thought, why not try to pick a Halloween-y type commander to cover for Halloween? And I was looking through Innistrad because I think Innistrad to me satisfies what I think of as horror. And the tribe I kept going back to was spirits, because at the moment in my neighborhood, a lot of my neighbors have big ghosts, right? Big inflatable ghosts out in their front yard. And my daughter loves them. She loves seeing them every time we walk outside, every time we go to the car, every time we leave to go anywhere. And so those ghosts just got stuck in my head. And I said, I haven't looked at Millicent in a while. Let's take a look at Millicent, Restless, Revenant, a 7-mana 4/4 spirit soldier that costs 1 less for each spirit we control. Whenever Millicent or another non-token spirit we control dies or deals damage to a player, we get to make a 1/1 spirit. So this is pretty cool because you kind of get to keep going wider. And I think our strategy revolves really well around us buffing our flying creatures with the myriad of enchantments that we have access to make them bigger and better. We also have some small blink synergies. There are a couple spirits that care about, blinking creatures and come back in to get their ETB triggers against. We have that. And then since we're going to be really evasive, we should be able to draw cards, right, out of combat damage, right, to our opponents. We're going to try to put that package together, try to basically just rule the sky with our spirits, right, as we move our game plan forward. But as far as our spirits go, I like there's a lot of randomness to spirits, and there are some fun things that we get to push together, but at the same time, there's a lot of really interesting effects. Cemetery Illuminator says whenever it enters or attacks, we exile a card from a graveyard. We can look at our top card of our library at any time. And then once per turn, we can cast a spell from the top as long as it shares a type with the card that this is exiled. It's kind of nice. I mean, a little bit of graveyard hate and potentially the ability to play other creatures off the top, which is pretty cool. Drogscar Reinforcement kind of plays double duty. It has melee and gives all other spirits melee, which is potentially up to a +3/+3 bonus every combat as long as we attack all 3 of our opponents. But it also prevents all non-combat damage that we dealt to our spirits, protecting them from, damage-based board wipes, which is always important because I think Blasphemous Act is a very popular board wipe. But also, you have decks that rely on dealing damage to creatures and things like that, so that's an option as well. Dust Animus says that if we control 5 or more untapped lands, it comes in with 2+1/+1 counters and lifelink. It's a flyer, and you could plot it. So we could plot it and then play it later, have it come in with lifelink, and be a 4/5 for us, which isn't a bad body before we get to all the buffs that could be on it. Ethereal Investigator, when it comes in, you investigate X times or X number of opponents you have, so you have the option to make up clues, and then whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a spirit. This is most often going to happen because we're going to have ways to draw when we deal damage. And so that's going to force us to, again, make more spirits. And then we have defensive bodies as well as attacking bodies. Hanged Executioner makes a 1/1 spirit when it comes in. So not a bad way to have a fun blink target. Same thing with, Ethereal Investigator. These are spirits we could blink and get more value from them coming back in a second time. And then Executioner does have the option for 4 mana to exile itself to exile a creature. So that's kind of a fun way to 1-for-1 if we need it to happen. Kami of False Hope says we could sack it to prevent all combat damage to be dealt this turn. This is great as a defensive way to stop a big combo that our opponents have going on, or stop a big alpha strike and keep us alive for one next turn, potentially to do it ourselves. Catilda is one of my favorites here because it's a flying lifelinking star where star is the number of enchantments and spirits we control. We are playing enchantments, right? Some of our buff enchantments, but we're playing a lot of spirits. So Catilda's going to get big. And then if Catilda ever goes to the graveyard, we can disturb it out on the backside and give the same ability to another creature, but just +1/+1 for each of those. So not a bad kind of dual threat there. Kira, Great Glass Spinner, gives all of our creatures the ability to counter a spell that targets them, or ability that targets them for the first time each turn. That's really useful to protect them at least once and stop removal if possible. Mausoleum Wanderer kind of does a similar thing. Whenever a spirit comes in, it gets a little bit bigger. But you can sack it to counter an instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays X, where X is its power. So here's where it potentially shut down a big instant or sorcery that maybe our opponents need to do something for. Wanderer will eventually probably just be a threat on its own. But it's nice that you get that option to sacrifice it and kind of get that dual purpose of it. Nebelgast Herald allows us to tap down a creature an opponent controls whenever it or another spirit comes in. That's pretty nice because you could start tapping things down that might be in our way that we need to attack. Rattle Chains gives a spirit hexproof when it comes in, but it makes all of our spirit spells be able to be cast at flash speed, which is nice to cast at our opponent's turn instead of our turn. Kind of hold up mana, make our opponent's turn we might have removal or interaction, and then still be able to flash those spirits in on their turn. Remorseful Cleric is just a 2/1 flyer, but it can sacrifice to exile somebody's graveyard. This is really nice if you're playing against a big graveyard deck or a mill deck or a delirium deck. You can target them specifically at the right time by just exiling their graveyard. Selfless Spirit can protect our whole board, give them indestructible. Shackle Guys can untap or tap 2 untapped spirits we control to tap a creature we don't control, which is pretty cool. Nice to be able to tap things down at the right time, and we're going to hopefully have enough 1/1 spirits laying around that we should be able to use these abilities fairly cheaply, right, with that. And then Windborn Muse, stopping our opponent from attacking us unless they pay 2 for each creature. So kind of that mini ghostly prison style effect, but it's on a spirit, 2/3 body. Like I said, there's just a little bit of blink in the deck. Not a ton, but I think it's still relevant to be important. Things like Brago that can do it whenever it deals damage to a player. We can combat damage to a player. We can exile any target of non-land permanents and bring them back in. So if we have, enchantments that do things or things like that, we can do that. But most of the time, it's just going to be blinking spirits and bringing them back in, whether to untap them after they've dealt damage or if they have ETB abilities. Soul Hoarder does a very similar thing. Can just exile a creature, bring it back, and then Abuelo has the option to do it for 3 mana. It comes back at the beginning and step in. I do like Abuelo because at least it has Ward 2, so if it's a spirit that can get bigger and have some protection as it grows as well. As far as card draw goes, again, a lot of it's going to be on damage, because I think it's one of the easiest ways to get it in this deck with us being evasive in the air, right? So things like Biden of Thassa and Reconnaissance Mission are going to draw us a card whenever a creature we control deals damage to a player. But we do also have the option of something like Kindred Discovery to draw whenever a spirit comes in and whenever a spirit attacks. So that we can start churning through our deck and getting the things we need into our hand. But I think the main way that we're going to win most of the time is trying to get a few of these buff effects to our entire board and turn our 1/1s into 4/4s or 5/5s and our 2/2s into 6/6s and just start trying to win the game, win the table in the air around our opponents. Drug Skull Captain gives a flat +1/+1 to all our other spirits and hexproof. Empyrean Eagle is just going to give all our flying creatures +1/+1. Patrician Geist gives all of our spirits +1/+1 and allows us to cast things a little bit cheaper out of the graveyard, which some of our spirits do care about because some of them have that disturb mechanic from like Catilda. So we do have the option to do some of that, although it's not the main point of the deck. Supreme Phantom just giving all of the spirits +1/+1. We have things like a Chroma's Will. It could be a big alpha strike card, giving all of our creatures vigilance, double strike, flying, or lifelink, indestructible, and pro from each color, and we can get both as long as Millicent's out. Rally of Wings feels like a fun one in the deck, giving all of our creatures +2/+2 if they have flying until end of turn, but it untaps all of them, which is bad. This could be used either offensively, right, to pair with one of our spirits that taps our spirits to do things, or this could be a really great way to use defensively, to block if need be. But I think more often we're going to use it offensively, right, on the attack and getting in to the zone. Favorable Winds and Flowering of the Way Tree roll give our creatures +1/+1. Flowering of the Way Tree gets that little extra rider of +2/+1 and Ward 1 instead for legendary creatures. And then Cathar's Crusade's a great build around for creature decks. Whenever a creature comes in, you put a counter on each creature you control. It doesn't take very long for Cathar's Crusade to get out of hand and make our board even bigger for our opponents to deal with. Radiant Destiny, another +1/+1 is for a creature type. And then if we have the City's Blessing, they also get Vigilance. Not bad and definitely helpful. And then a card that I've started messing around with in a couple of my Go Wide decks that is really useful, Starlight Spectacular. So at the beginning of the combat on your turn, you choose creatures you control one at a time until each creature has been chosen. Each of the creatures get +1/+1 for each creature chosen before it. So what you want to do, let's say we've had 2 or 3 spirits come in this turn, you're going to pick those first and then pick the ones that are going to be able to attack this turn, getting them a big buff as we go into combat. Remember, we're already in the air, so I think it's going to lead to a big benefit in our end for attacking. But I've said it before and I'll say it again on the show. No deck's ever complete. This is version 1.0 of the deck. And I think there's a lot of things that could be learned in testing. And I think the biggest one for most people is going to sit in the middle of the screen, which is a card like Roaming Throne. I think Roaming Throne is probably one of the best cards in every deck that it gets put in. And it's a card that I wanted to put in the list. But at the end of the day, I try to keep a budget here on this show. And I hate trying to put a $30 roaming throne into every deck when I'm trying to give other options into the deck. Do I think roaming throne belongs in the deck? Yes, it does. It doubles up Millicent's trigger, which is great. But I also hate at the same time being the person who puts roaming throne into every travel deck that I brew. I think you guys could see the dichotomy of that. And so it's one of those things where I didn't want to include it, but I wanted to show you that it is an option, of course, for any travel deck, and it will make the deck better. Coastal Piracy for a little bit more of draw. If we need some more draw, especially on hit, I think we could add in 1 or 2 more of these abilities. I think we have enough draw in the deck, but hey, you never know. You may find that you need more, and so it's good for that. And then Denal's really interesting. I left it out of the brew because I thought we had enough good spirits. But it says whenever you cast an unlegendary creature spell with flying, you can copy it and it becomes a 1/1 spirit instead. I think it fits the deck for sure, but I just couldn't really figure out what slot to put it in because once I went through picking all the spirits that buff other spirits or help other spirits, there was only a certain amount of slots left, and I kind of wanted to put them in for other spirits. I make sure that we have that ability and that we have them laying around. So, I mean, I could see Denal being very good, but it's not a spirit, and I kind of wanted to focus on the spirits. And there's other options like Reflections of Littjara that we are playing that can copy things and give us that ability. Well, let's get into playtest number 1. Keeping a 3-lander with Spectral Arcanist. We didn't get to see this one. When it enters, you may cast an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to the number of spirits you control from a graveyard without paying its mana cost. So not your graveyard, a graveyard. And if it would be put into a graveyard, you exile it instead. So this is great. Another great blink target for some of our blinkers. Field of Souls, whenever a non-token creature is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, we make a spirit. So that's pretty cool, right? Even when our opponent's creatures or our creatures dying anywhere can make that happen, and that works pretty well with Millicent as well. Plowshares and that Investigators. We've got a good chance of working our way up to some tokens, or that Millicent is 7 mana, so we do kind of need to work our way up to it. We'll play the Enlightenment so we can get a peek. We see Drogskull Captain, not a bad thing to play on turn 3 right now, if need be. So for 2 mana, seeing much at the moment. I mean, we can just hold up the counterspell, make our opponents, if there's something early game that really matters, we can take care of that. But turn 3, I think we just get the Drogskull Captain down. Party started. Andril's great. Whenever the crew creature attacks, we can make 2 spirit tokens with flying. And then if it's legendary, they come in tapped and attacking, but not a bad way to get some more spirits onto the battlefield. Before we draw that Secluded Courtyard, that was great, allows us to keep getting into some things. I think we'll go with the Investigator, and again, in an average game, we're going to make 3 clues. Take an attacker with the Drogskull Captain. Now, in theory, Investigator is going to have +1/+1 and Hexproof. That's nice, and that means Millicent, whenever it comes down, we'll get that as long as Drogskull's out. So, Millicent is 5 right now, because we have 2 spirits. So, I don't think we're going to be able to get Millicent down this turn, but that's A-okay. We could do Andril, and we could do something like Rattle Chains. Kind of, part of me kind of wants to just crack Clue, draw a card. That's going to make us a Spirit, which is kind of what I wanted to do. The really part about that is that drew us a land, so now we have that. So now we're back up to 3 mana. We have 3 spirits now, so Millicent is 4 mana, so we're just a little bit off that. I'd kind of want to hold up some removal here. If I go, 1, 2 here for the clue, I've got enough mana to hold up Counterspell and Swords of Plowshares here on turn 5, take some attacks, right? But just hold up some interaction. And if on their end step there's no interaction, then we just flash the Rattle Chains in, so that way on our turn Millicent can be a little bit cheaper. But if so, I want to use the removal, right, to affect our opponents if we can. So 4 spirits here, so Millicent's just 3, so I think we happily do that. Pick the island up for the Siduri's Chancery. We would have 2 mana left. I guess we could crack the clue. Another spirit, draw a card. Right, just try to get our way to get that down. Seance board is pretty cool. Whenever if a creature died that turn at the beginning of each end step, you put a Seance counter on it, or soul counter on it, and we can make a bunch of mana for each of them that have died, which is a cool way to ramp up mana into the mid to the late game. Take the attacks here. that we can. Again, we're in the air, so we're probably going to have some decent attacks. And now next turn, we can look to keep pushing our board state forward 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. I like the idea of Field of Souls, just to protect that board a little bit more, right? So that way, if our non-token, spirits dies, we're going to make 4, 2 for each of them, right? With Field of Souls and Millicent out. So that was 4 mana. I've got 3 mana left. It makes sense to put something like Andoril down. We could crack a clue and get another spirit. There's a lot of options of what we could do. I kind of like the idea of just holding up this removal again, taking a big attack here now that Millicent can attack. And I think one of those tokens, or both of them, can attack. They got a little bit of buff. Again, just try to use our position in the air to help us going forward. And then this turn, tapping with all that mana again, we could get something like Seance Board down. We could get Andoril down. We would be able to equip, right? Or we could hold up that, keep holding up that removal. But again, get the Seance Board working. We're still in the air. Right now, I apologize. Last turn and the turn before, we probably would have made more spirits when Millicent was out, seeing them deal damage. That's on me. So our board's probably a little bit bigger than it was. But you can kind of see what we're driving for here. This mid-range, flying build where we're getting in for damage and kind of working the board that way. But let's get into playtest number 2, keeping a 3-lander. With Remorseful Cleric, Radiant Destiny, Haunted Library. Whenever a creature or an opponent controls dies, we could pay 1 if we do make spirit. And then Path of the Ghost Hunter, X1 and a white to make X spirit tokens with flying. So not a bad kind of round here. Let's do the Temple of Enlightenment turn 1. I kind of want to see what we have on top, and it is Nebelgast Herald. Not too bad. We'll come into turn 2. So I can either play, a creature, or I can get the beachfront down. Because at the moment, I either have to choose to play a 2-drop or a 3-drop, right? I think I'll just get the beachfront down. And then, okay, well, we have the exact same problem now. Now we have Prairie Stream, which will need another basic land, right, other than that island in our hand to make it come down untapped. So now I kind of bit to put a 3-drop down, right? I'll just do the Prairie Stream and the Remorseful Cleric. That way we're getting, towards bringing Millicent down just 1. All right, here on turn 4, we draw Strixhaven Stadium. A great way to turn our flyers into a win con. Whenever we deal damage to an opponent, one of our creatures deals damage to an opponent, we put a point counter on it, and then it has 10 or more point counters. We can remove all of them, and that player loses the game. So this is a way to use our small creatures to ping into an opponent, potentially run them at risk of losing, right, or being in big trouble. Millicent is 6 right now because we just 1 spirit on board, so I kind of like the idea of getting more in. The path would get us down to be able to cast Millicent next turn, but for X is 2, I feel like it's kind of a waste, right? I kind of would want to do it for more if possible. I'm kind of thinking the Stadium and Haunted Library. That for the Stadium and that for Haunted Library. Get the Haunted Library set up so that on future turns we can start making spirits. Now we would have enough for Millicent, having 6. Mana. But I also don't mind the idea of setting up again. The only nice part is let's see, if I do Millicent this turn, I could get a spirit from Remorseful Cleric hitting our opponents. I think that probably makes the most sense. Get an attack in this turn with the Remorseful Cleric. I should be able to hit, getting us that 1/1. And now this turn, that would be what? I would tap it, and then that's at least 2-point counters here, right? Strixhaven Stadium. Now I've got 6 mana again. We do have the option of something like a Chroma's Will, but I feel like it's kind of early, right, with the amount we have. I think I would go like 3 into this Path of the Ghost Hunter. I'd leave up the 1 for Haunted Library, you know what I mean? So that we can maybe even get a spirit out of that, but I'd go 1, 2, 3 that way. Take an attack this turn, and Millicent and Remorseful Cleric should be able to get in, I would imagine. Well, there, let's say this goes up to 5 or 6 this turn with all the ones that hit. Let's say maybe we have an opponent's creature die, and we could pay the 1 into the Haunted Library, so we're just amassing, right, those creatures, trying to get them all out. I apologize. That last turn, I would have played the Chancery and bounced a land there. I apologize. So now this turn, draw that land, play the land back down. So no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. Now we could have Chroma's Will, but I think we would just Radiant Destiny plus a Chroma's Will, right? Now all the spirits have Double Strike, Lifelink, protection from all creatures, and this should at least allow us to knock out one player with just the Cirque-Staven Stadium, and then do some good damage to another player, right? And take a big attack here, get a few more spirits, and work ourselves in to the mid game. Let me know, what do you think of Millicent down in the comment section below? Again, I still feel like it needs some big time spirits to make it feel better. Again, I think, something like Roaming Throne will pair really well with Millicent as you're dealing damage, just getting a ton of spirits. But I think, again, I think there still just needs to be something more. I think adding things like, adding something like, now that I'm in the back of it, like something like Dollmaker's Shop, so that you could use the Porcelain Gallery to make all the spirits bigger, might not be bad. And there's a card or two from Foundations that look half decent as well. That might not be bad options for this deck. So maybe we'll take a look back at this one in the future. But let me know what you think of Millicent down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.